we're going to take a look at the transport options in Codex Space Marines and how they rank amongst one another. To begin with, we have the Impulsor, which is the Primaris transport option. This comes in at 80 points and has a capacity of 6 models. That is only Tacticus models. It cannot carry any jump pack units, Wolfen, Gravis, anything along those lines. It's just literally Tacticus and Phobos units. It does come with a nice little rule called Fire Index 6. So 6 models within the transport can fire their weapons as if it's the profile for the tank, which is really nice. They've got T9 body and 11 wounds, so pretty durable. And what they bring to the table is a massive amount of small arms fire. You can essentially, in a rapid fire range, get out 22 strength 4 shots, which is nothing to be balked at, especially when you consider with this guy, you can maybe put an Infernus squad in there again, another slightly probably underrated unit. So if you've got 22 strength 4 shots and you've then got 5 strength 5 d6 amount of shots, that's a lot of firepower you've got going into potentially in your local meta horde armies, T3 armies, even toughness 4 armies if they only have the 1 wound. It's going to struggle with that amount of firepower. If you're putting it into the certain factions such as the Firestorm and you're getting the assault keyword on your weapons, you can then move and advance with this unit and still unload absolutely everything. And when you're getting within 12 inches, getting that +1 strength as well. So this guy's balked at quite a bit, but he does actually have a lot of fireability in certain metas. A couple of points deductions here and there, and it could become a really good unit. I think for the moment, he is hovering, I think, between A and B in reality, depending on what your local meta is. Of course, if you're in a meta that has a substantial amount of high toughness vehicles, you're in a very Titan orientated meta, they are going to be more down towards this end because those low strength shots aren't going to do much. And you don't really want to bring the likes of Infernus to those battles anyway. So I think for now we'll probably put them at the top of B. Next we have the Humble Rhino. This comes in at 75 points. It's a T9 body with 10 wounds, so it isn't too bad, and does have firing deck 2. It does have quite a big capacity, being 12 man capacity. The problem is that you can only carry firstborn tactical bodies within it. So your best option from this probably is taking a Devastator squad. Now we might have the meta at some point with a couple of points reductions where a Devastator squad in a Rhino Rush style army might be quite viable. You're jumping out with a load of multi-motors or las cannons in a relatively cheap unit in a cheap transport. You're going to be able to unleash quite a bit of firepower towards the start of the game. Has quite a nice ability to regenerate a wound in each command phase, so it may stay around for a little bit longer. But if there's concentrated fire coming in on the Rhino, it's not going to stay around for that long, just being T9 10 wounds. I think it's not quite as good as the Impulsor, even though it can carry more models. It's got more limited in what exactly it can do, and it doesn't have much firepower to go with it, just really with having that Stormbolter. So I think in the current meta, you are putting it in C tier, but it does have the potential with a couple of point deduction here and there, and depending on what your meta is, just maybe push up to B. Next up we have the slightly more firepower orientated version of the Rhino being the Razorback. So this guy comes in at 95 points, which might be slightly on the expensive side. It's a T9 10 wound body, same as the Rhino. It's got a nice little rule that allows you to re-roll wound rolls for a disembarked model that's left this unit, and the caveat is that the Razorback has to shoot and hit the unit that it's firing at. But that is quite a nice little buff to have. It has the same restrictions for who it can carry along the same lines as the Rhino, being only your firstborn units. And it has a it has a smaller capacity. It's only got 6 that it can carry. But again, a Devastator unit in a certain meta could work really well. If you're trying to get the most out of its shooting ability, you might opt for the Heavy Bolter rather than the Twin Las Cannon. But coming with a Twin Las Cannon and a one-shot hunter-killer missile is not too bad if you're popping out with your four Las Cannons or or multi-melters, you've really got the ability to push this guy forward and tank whatever you want to shoot at. Now, they won't stay there for an awful lot afterwards, unless your opponent decides just to ignore this option. But it is quite an alpha strikey or counter punch ability you can have. And again, with points moving in certain directions in the future, this might be quite a viable option. I think for the moment it is around the Rhino. The points difference, you are paying that additional 20 points for a twin link las cannon essentially, and to have that reroll wound ability, which is probably slightly on the nicer side, so I'll put him just above the Rhino in C tier. We're on to the drop pod now. It comes in at 70 points, and for what it brings to the table, it might be slightly on the expensive side. It can deep strike turn 1, but it's got quite a big profile, so your opponent will likely screen it out from anywhere you actually want to put it. It is only toughness 7 and has 8 wounds. It's got no firepower to talk about really that's worth mentioning. It does have a 10-man capacity, but it can't transport Wolfram Gravis, Centurions or Terminators. So what you will be getting out of this, with possibly the likes of Blade Guard coming out of it, there's not really much point in taking it. There's too many restrictions in place. It's too expensive for what it does. Once it lands, that's it. It's down where it is. It's zero objective control, so you can't even plonk it onto an objective. So it doesn't really serve a function in 10th at the moment. If it had some of the restrictions taken out and it could have different types of models in, then you might be, a little bit more likely to bring it, and you can stick maybe a Devastator squadron and they can pop out. But for, you're looking at 5 more points, you've got a Rhino that's going to be able to take you anywhere on the board you want to and have the ability to carry on moving throughout the game. I think this is distinctly in the D tier at the moment. There's no real reason to take it. There's too many options for ways to take it out. It's being toughness 7 is terrible. It's far too expensive to actually serve a purpose. And it does set up there so you can just go and tag it in combat if you don't want to be targeted. Say it's near an objective. Your opponent can just tag it with an infantry unit and sit on the objective at the same time, and then you can't shoot at that infantry unit. You have to charge it. So it adds limitations to certain styles of play as well. So yeah, D tier is where it's going to live for, I imagine, the entire of 10th edition. Now we're on to all the different variants of the Laind Raiders. First up, we just have the standard Laind Raider. Comes in at 240 points. Now all 3 variants are toughness 12, 16 wounds and 2 up save, which is a really nice profile. And they have all the same rule that if you make a normal rule, the units within can then disembark and still be able to charge, which is quite nice. So the normal variant has a 12-man capacity. It can carry essentially everything. Jump, Gravis and Terminators count as 2 of the slots, and if you want to take any Centurions, they count as 3 of the places within the Laind Raider. It comes equipped with your 4 Godhammer las cannons, which are really nice coming in. That's 2 Godhammer las cannons, I should say, but 4 shots. They're coming at strength 12, minus 3 AP, d6 plus 1 damage, so quite a nice amount of damage output you have with them. They also come equipped with a heavy bolter as well as that you got a multi-melter and a hunter missile killer. You do of course have some storm bolters as well, but they're not really much to speak about. So there's quite a nice variation of different strengths, AP and damage you've got there to make it quite a flexible unit. Being such a high toughness and wounds, they're very hard to take out. That 2 up save is really beneficial for them, and the massive capacity makes them a real threat. The restrictions you have really are on the terrain in your meta. If it's quite heavy terrain, you might not be able to move around as much as you would like to, but if you're going for more of the GW area terrain with ruins within, they should be able to move around with no problems whatsoever. I mean, going by the fact that it's got a lot of firepower, high strength firepower, which sometimes we struggle with in Space Marines. It's high toughness, high wounds and a good save. and it's got that 12-man capacity and it can essentially carry everything. I think it's difficult not to look at the Laind Raiders being an A tier or top of B. I think, bearing in mind what we already have in place, it is going to outrank a lot of the other units just because it brings a lot to the table. It is expensive, but you're getting a lot for those 200 points as well. So I think it's fairly comfortable to put it as an A tier option for Space Marines. Now we're on to the Laind Raider Crusader. Again, has the same profile as the original Laind Raider, being the T12, wound 16, 2-up save. It does come in at 230 points, so it is slightly cheaper. And it does come with a nice capacity, boosting up to 16 capacity, which is really nice. Has the same restrictions in place for the normal Laind Raider with what you'd expect, costing 2 places and your Centurions costing 3. The difference you have is in its output. It mainly comes with types of bolters, which aren't great really when you look at them, but if you're getting into rapid fire range, you're looking at having 28 really strength 4 shots. You do have the assault cannon for another 6 strength 6 shots that comes with devastating wounds, which isn't too bad. And again, you get the hunter killer missile and the multi-melter. So it does have an extra capacity, which is quite nice. It does give you the ability to carry a 10-man unit with a leader and a 5-man unit by itself. So it gives you a little bit more flexibility. Or if you are trying to really load up with something such as aggressives, then you can take your 6-man and a leader and still be able to fit in, which is quite nice. It is worse than the other Laind Raider. You're losing a lot for losing those 10 points, and the extra capacity isn't really going to benefit you in a lot of cases because you're losing so much firepower. It is around B tier. You could put it either side of the Impulsor really. It essentially does a very similar job that the Impulsor does, but you are paying a massive premium to do so. What's that, about 170 points extra, 160 points extra? Oh, no, not quite bad. 150 points extra. My maths were out a fair bit then. Just to do a very similar job, but you're not getting the firing deck as well. So you are probably sneaking in behind the Impulsor, really. Without a bit of a points drop for this guy, he's going to struggle to be taking over some of the other options that are available. He might even be sneaking below the Razorback, depending on what the meta is. Just for the points value, 230 points is very high for this unit. Now, for now, I'll put him at the front of C. That's where you can live for the time being. On to the final Laind Raider now, being the Laind Raider Redeemer. So this guy is more expensive than the other ones. He's coming in at a shocking 260 points. Same profile, being the T12, 16 wounds, 2-up save. He does have a 14 capacity, so it's 2 lower than the Crusader and 2 higher than the standard Laind Raider. Same restrictions in place. He does come with quite nice torrent weapons in Flamers, so if you are going for the Firestorm, you do have the ability to really bump up their firepower, their damage output. Outside of that, you might struggle. You are coming in with 2d6 plus 6 shots. They are auto hits, -2 damage, so they're not too bad. If you're using the 2 CP stratagem to boost them further in Firestorm, you're going to get a lot of utility out of them. Otherwise, it's a very expensive unit. You do have the twin assault cannon, being again those 6 shots at 1 damage, no AP, but you do get dev wounds on him, and a hunter killer missile and a multi-melter. So really for this you're paying an additional 40 points to swap out your Godhammer las cannons for what are essentially 2 big heavy flamers and 2 additional spots. It's just nowhere near as efficient as the ordinary Laind Raider. It is around the Crusader really. The point value alone, I think, will pop it behind the Razorback. There's no real reason to take this guy, being the additional 30 points over the Crusader, and all you're gaining in reality is a lower amount of shots, but they're at a higher strength value, and they've got the AP, the additional AP and damage, but you are losing 2 slots for your ability to carry, so this will make it difficult to get the most out of the capacity if you are taking your 6-man Gravis unit with a leader that is you at maximum. I think else can go in there with it. I think 260 points is very expensive. It might actually push it behind the Rhino just based on how expensive it is and how little you are actually getting for your money. We're now on to the 2 repulsors. First we'll go with the ordinary repulsor. This guy comes in 190 points. He has the toughness 12, 16 wound profile, which is quite nice. He has the ability that if you're within 3 inches of him and a charge is declared on you, you have the ability to get in the repulsor and not be charged. Your opponent does have the opportunity to change the charge tactic at that point, but it's quite a nice ability if you want to keep something alive that's about to get absolutely mushed. He comes with a lot of small arms fire. You've got the repulsor array. You do have the Gatling being the strength 6. You have the Las Talon, which isn't too bad, but it's only strength 10. Then you've got the heavy bolters as well, which you can swap out for a heavy las cannon. So there's a lot of variation in the shots available on it. You are more looking at targeting your T3, T4 bodies, trying to utilize as much 3s and 2s to wound as possible just to tear through some infantry squads. It does have a quite nice capacity, being a 12-man capacity. And it can take your jump troops, Wolf and Gravis and Terminators, but they cost 2 again. And Centurions do cost 3. So I think for 190 points for the amount of small arm fire you bring, and you do have slightly heavy shots in your Las Talon, and you can take the Twinlings Las Cannon. You've got a decent amount of firepower and a bit of variation in there. The 12-man capacity is quite high. The ability to jump back in is quite nice if you're ever under threat. I think he's quite good where he is at the moment. I think you're probably putting him ahead of the Impulsor. He's much more expensive, but he does bring more firepower. And that toughness 12 is hard to punch through. There's 16 wounds. And I think at 190 points, it's quite nicely pointed at the moment when you consider your Redemptor is pushing 220 points. So he's not too bad where he is at the moment. Next up we have the other Redemptor. Not the Redemptor. The Repulsor. I imagine every Redemptor could carry people into battle. That'd be hilarious. You have your Repulsor Executioner. Now this has the same profile, being your T12, 16 wounds, but it does have a smaller capacity, being a 6-man capacity. He can transport everything that the other Repulsor can, so your jump packs, your Wolf and your Gravis, but they do cost 2. Your Centurions can be carried, but they cost 3, so they can't really be carried because they won't fit in. And he's got a nice ability when he's targeting a unit that's below half strength. He gets +1 to hit, which is really nice considering you're probably taking the heavy laser destroyer. You've then got the twin heavy bolter. You've got the Gatling cannon. You've got the defense array, which is a substantial amount of shots. This guy really has the ability to, like the Repulsor, target those weaker units and put a lot of damage on them. But with that heavy laser destroyer, he has the ability to target your harder to hit opponent and really punch through their armor. That'd be wounding essentially everything on the game in 3s. And he has the ability just to do a lot of damage. The 6-man capacity is not quite as good and being 220 points, but he does bring much more firepower to the table for those 30 points. That ability for the +1 to hit when targeting something that is at half strength is really nice, especially if they're popping things such as smoke or lightning and fast reactions. It stops you from being nerfed. You do have the heavy keyword as well, so if you are stationary and they pop that, you'll still be hitting on 2s, which is really nice. Being Anvil Siege Force and you're stationary, you then +1 to hit as well, which is quite a nice boost. So this guy is pretty much, if you want to get something on an objective and then sit there and hold it, because he is objective control 5, so he can hold an objective quite well. You then have your units pop out and unleash a lot of firepower. Because he can take a lot in the game, there's not many restrictions what he can take. You're very flexible with what you put inside of him. I think for his points being 220, He's the same points range as the Laind Raider. He doesn't quite hit as hard because the Laind Raider has a higher amount of shots at the high strength value, but then he has that substantial amount of low strength firepower as well, which really helps to take out some units and really make him want to take the mid board, take the objective, wipe off what's on it, unleash his cargo, and then sit there for the rest of the game just targeting the other objectives and wiping out whatever he can. I think he's quite a good unit. He might be slightly overpriced at 220, but I think people are sleeping on him slightly, being that T12 body and those 16 wounds. The 2-up save for the Laind Raider probably edges him just ahead, and he has the bigger capacity as well. And he's more niche with his firepower, where he is targeting the tougher opponents, where the Repulsor's got a little bit more variation, so you will have some wasted shots at times. So I think the Laind Raider is edging him slightly for the moment. Finally, we have the Stormraven Gunship. A quite expensive model at 240 points. Toughness 10, 14 wounds, so not quite as tough as the Laind Raider and the Repulsor. Does have a nice ability for -1 to incoming damage. Even though he is a flyer, he does have the hover ability, so if you decide to switch him to hover, he can start on the battlefield, which is quite nice. He is then limited to the 20-inch movement, and he does lose the -1 to hit, and for most things in the game to be unable to charge him. But I think to have him available from turn 1, really, then turn 3 onwards, because even if he comes in turn 2, he can't really move, and he's stuck. He has quite a bit of firepower, really. He's got the Storm Strike missiles, which is 2 strength, 10 shots of 3 damage, which is nice. He's got twin multi-melter, twin las cannon, and he can carry not only 12 infantry, he can carry a dreadnought alongside them as well, which is quite nice. Same restrictions, so there's the likes of the Repulsor. You can carry your Jump, your Wolf, and your Gravis, and your Terminates, and they take up 2 spots, and your Centurion takes up 3. He's not a dedicated troop, unlike the Rhino, Impulsor, and Razorback, and the Drop Pod, so he can show up with nothing within him, which is quite nice. He's got quite a lot of anti-tank firepower, which is quite nice, and he can carry a lot. It would be hilarious him dropping a Dreadnought and a load of Centurions at the same time, or even a squad of Gravis with a Dreadnought just in the middle of the battlefield and going, "Come at me, bro." That's quite nice to see the surprise on your opponent's face. 240 points is probably slightly on the expensive side. Could do with probably knocking off a good 40 points from there. He is only toughness 10 afterward. And to really get the most out of him, you've got to have hover, so you're losing the -1 to hit as well. So really, you'd want to see this guy sub 200 points for him to really be a viable option. Outside of the points, his datasheet is quite nice for what it is. The -1 to damage is nice. He's got no restrictions really on what he can carry, and again, the Dreadnought is just a nice little cherry on the cake, just to surprise your opponent. But because of the points, he is going to be down in C tier. If he was more like 180 points, I'd be tempted to put him in B tier, either side of the Impulsor really, but just at that points level, he is going to drop down probably behind the Razorback. If the Rhino was to shift 5 or so points, 5 to 10 points, and the Devastator squad was to shift 5 and 10 points again, the Rhino might be a real viable option, pushing up for a bit of Rhino rush and unleashing loads of Devastators. But where it is at the moment, I think it's just behind the likes of the Razorback and the Stormraven Gunship. Plus the Stormraven Gunship just looks awesome on the battlefield. You can't hate on a massive transport flyer coming in. It just looks really awesome. So I don't think anything is quite in the S tier. I think you've got the Laind Raider and the Executioner, and even the Repulsor, if they had a little bit of a points drop, could really push up. I think if the defense arrays for the Repulsor and the Executioner got -1 AP, it would definitely push them up a tier. Having 0 AP and a lot of strength 4 shots isn't great into a lot of armies, but if you just give them that -1, that -1 alone would probably put the Executioner up a bit, especially if you had a 10 to 15 point drop. The 2 Laind Raider variants, they're just too expensive for what they are at the moment. You're losing a lot by not taking the normal variant, and to have 2 to 4 more capacity and worse weapons for what is 30 additional points for the Crusader or Redeemer, I forget which ones they are. There's not really any reason to take them. Everything that's in C tier basically needs a big point drop or a change in how the meta is operating. The drop pod's just dead. It needs a new data sheet, really. It needs the ability to move afterwards. Is it the Deathclaw, the Dreadclaw, one that can move once it's dropped in and has some melee capability, or just have additional firepower. Having a handful of strength 4, maybe strength 5 shots isn't great. Maybe the ability to remove it from the battlefield once it's landed as well. That might be quite nice, because then it stops your opponent from tagging it. Or if it did have some objective control, if it had some OC, maybe if it was just 2, you could plonk it down and just hold on to it. It's just a very weird space at the moment for it. It can't really do much with what it can transport. I think the idea was maybe to have Blade Guard veterans in it, but because they're not a great data sheet, there's no real use taking a 6-man unit with a leader and then maybe additional 3-man unit. You're just not getting anything out of it by doing so. I think the Impulsor is a bit of a sleeper. I think a slight points drop and the Infernus a points drop would really push this guy up, especially considering where the meta might go. If you go into a more horde meta, if you're in a meta where there's a lot of T3 horde armies, if there's a lot of guards or maybe lots of termagants being run, having that amount of firepower at strength 4 and 5 Infernus Marines in, with that Overwatch ability as well, is really powerful to have. So I think the Impulsor is not far off being pushed up to an A tier based on the meta and any future points changes coming along. Now I know that the Space Marines aren't the biggest transport carriers at the moment, but we are seeing a move towards that. Some of the Chaos armies are really starting to lean into Rhinos, and we might see a little bit more movement into a transport meta in the near future, especially with additional codexes coming out. Some armies have much better transports than we currently have. Drukhari are absolutely mincing it with the likes of their Raiders at the moment with their new detachment. But there is a lot of movement to come in 10th edition still. There's a lot of codexes to come. We haven't had any additional campaign books come out. So there's a lot that can change in the future. So keep an eye on the space and don't knock your Space Marine transports too much, because some of them do look great. The size of the Laind Raiders and the Repulsors on the battlefield is something to be seen. They really stand out and they look quite imposing, which is quite nice. So what do you guys think? Are you a fan of the transports? Would you rearrange this anyway? Let me know below in the comment section. Check out these other videos, subscribe to the channel, become a member if you want to see additional content, and the Patreon will be coming soon. See you next time.